friends, it's been a year since I last saw y'all. Hope you're all slaying your New Year's resolutions, and if you're not, that's okay too. I know one certain gentleman who is crushing his New Year's resolution, which consisted of mainly two things: make us as miserable as possible, make as much money as possible in the process. And now that he's been elected by the people once again in the most legit and constitutional elections ever to be held, his mind and time are now dedicated fully to us in the worst way possible.
فلو شاءت إرادة ربنا أن أكون في الموقع ده إن شاء الله هيكون أمر ليه العجب. هشوفه.
There's a general state of apprehension among the people. You know that feeling when you ate something you shouldn't have and you can feel an explosive mess coming, but it's not quite there yet? It's the same but on a societal scale. But let's start this one off with something fun for a change. For the new year, our Santa Claus has and is still making sure everyone has a jolly old time. The esteemed citizens had some hilarious comments to say about that photo. Baba Luel, Santa's called Baba Noel here, and El Luel means woe. He goes around taking gifts from children while they sleep after cutting down the Christmas trees. Just because it's Christmas doesn't mean the trees will be spared. You gotta respect the discipline. We'll talk more about that in a second, but first I have something really juicy to tell you. Zelensky, yes, the Zelensky.
Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture.
Was caught up in a corruption case that involved Egypt. Apparently, Homeboy was using Western aid money for his personal use, which, I'm not even surprised. It's a third world country. Come on, money gets lost there all the fucking time. But it's hilarious seeing how he was held as a patriot superhero or some shit. And even more so that the Western aid efforts are dwindling for Ukraine, because they're being used to bomb the fuck out of Gaza. But I digress. What's really interesting is this next part. An Egyptian investigative journalist dug into this case since the mansion is in Egypt.
ازيكم عاملين ايه؟ انا اسمي محمد العلوي، انا صحفي استقصائي. من كام يوم في خلال الاسبوع اللي فات وقع في ايدينا عقد شراء عقار. طبعا يعني اكيد بتقول دلوقتي ايه الجديد او ايه الغير عادي في كده. طبعا العادي ان هو عقد شراء عقار مفيش اي مشكله، انما الغير عادي ان صاحبة العقار نفسه اسمها معايا في العقد أولجا يانشكو. طبعا هتقولوا لي مين دي حماة رئيس أوكرانيا. أيوة، حماة رئيس أوكرانيا اللي هو مين؟ زيلينسكي، فلاديمير زيلينسكي ده رئيس أوكرانيا. طبعا اشتريتها فين؟ اشتريتها عندنا في مصر، اشتريتها في الجونة ب$5 مليون. الكلام ده العقد ده اتوثق بتاريخ 16 مايو 2023. اشتريتها في محافظة البحر الأحمر في الجونة.
That man was found dead, or rather killed. Obviously, there's no clear official story on this, but the floating story is that a Ukrainian militia or gang was let in by our regime to do the thing. 4 months before his death, the journalist revealed a report believed to be the reason for his assassination, as he published about a luxury resort that Zelensky's mother-in-law, Olga Kyashko, had bought for $4.85 million, which was suspected to be from American aid to Ukraine, and Zelensky was accused of diverting the money for his personal interests. It is noteworthy the clip was removed from YouTube the moment the murdered journalist published it, which is typical. If anyone tells you YouTube is not biased, they're more full of shit than a clogged toilet. The police said that the death was due to cerebral hemorrhage resulting from a severe brain injury, in addition to fractures in various places. I wonder how they're gonna pass this off as a natural or accidental death. The brother of the victim accuses Ukrainian gangs of assassinating him as punishment for that report because they had been sending him death threats over the past period. I've seen no evidence that the system was complicit in this, but selling out has become a habit for our current regime, and they don't like journalists all that much anyway. So it's like 2 birds with 1 stone really for them, and they won't even have to do it themselves this time. And besides, I don't think a fucking gang would be able to get here and beat a man to a pulp without someone somewhere knowing about it and getting hush money. Especially that I assume this poor guy must have tried going to the police for safety following the threats. I just love how most political assassinations like this have death threats before them, and yet absolutely nothing is done to stop them. It's almost as if everyone everywhere is complicit in something to some capacity. All the more reason to keep this fucking thing on forever. Naturally, Egyptians were not too thrilled by this news. Not that the system will change anything, and the man's already dead, so it's ultimately pointless to complain. Nevertheless, here are some of the responses. Is this normal? People come in and kill someone on our land who had been getting threats and then leave all nilly-willy? The Egyptian intelligence agents play dead. Where's the Egyptian intelligence? Or is it busy protecting the entity? Referring to the Zionist entity, which Egypt's government is heavily but quietly supporting. This incident should be transparently investigated, especially that the circumstances pose many questions that go beyond the Egyptian borders. Journalism is not a crime. The criminals are the ones who prevent it, control it, or assault journalists. Now back to Baba Wheel. The first gift he stole from us is electricity. After delaying the execution of price increases as per instructions from His Majesty, submitting suggestions for increasing power price charts to the ministers to announce it in January. So now not only is it shitty, it's expensive. If you recall, these decisions were supposed to come out in late 2023, but they got delayed for the elections. You know, as part of the play, he can't take measures that would make him even more unpopular during the totally unscripted elections he's gonna win. Speaking of the elections, Tantawi is still in the ringer for daring to run for office.
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
His and his campaign members' trial got delayed to the 6th of February. That's what happens when you're on the naughty list in Egypt, kids. So you better eat your veggies, because you can't afford any other food anyway. And the price increases did go through on January 5th as planned, a chart of which is shown here. Here you are charged based on your consumption. The more you use, the more you're charged per kilowatt. And while that's an alright system, they obviously don't do it by the book. Instead, they overcharge people, they rig the meters, and sometimes they don't send someone to collect the bill and then fine you for not paying it on time. And these are the things that I know of. There's probably more tricks up their sleeves. But it's fine because damn near everyone now has figured out a way around it. Some made contraptions in their houses to spoof the readings, some pay the guy who picks up the readings, some divert the lines away from the meter. You know, breaking the law just to get our rights.
You know, the funny thing is, on the outside, I was an honest man, straight as an arrow. I had to come to
Egypt
be a crook.
Despite the price increase, if anything, it's even worse now. Aside from the scheduled load shedding, which I'll update you on in a second, people now get unscheduled cuts randomly. Power cut at 10 and came back less than a minute later. And it just did again a while ago and also came back less than a minute later. As if they signed a deal with the appliance merchants to burn our devices. Both times I managed to turn off the power from the main board, but what if I'm not home or asleep? If you're wondering why I shut off the board while the power is out, it's to protect devices. It's common here for power to surge when it comes back after a cut, and that's bad for your devices, obviously. My family personally have lost a bunch of appliances to that shit, and the luckier devices were just damaged, not completely fried. As for load shedding, well, it's safe to say that it's here to stay now.
About 10 times a day, man, all year long.
Not just for a couple of summer months like the government said at first. The government is doing its best to end the load shedding phenomenon. We must admit that there's pressure on the power grid due to increasing consumption in light of the urban expansion and new projects being opened, which pushes us to continue this plan for 2 hours daily. Advisor Mohammed Al-Humsani, spokesman of the Board of Ministers. If you recall, when this all started, they said it was during summer months because of high load, which holds some truth. Power use is higher here in summer because it's hot as fuck and summer is 10 fucking months a year. But we're in winter right now. So the fact they say it's bad now, during low season, well, I'm not looking forward to this summer. Not that I normally am. Fuck that season anyway. Also, I can't help but laugh that the coat hanger they used this time is their projects that we never asked for, needed, or wanted, but are being bled dry to fund regardless. Also, in case you haven't figured it out on your own, he's lying. And our heroes at Masaddash, a free news network that reports on Egypt stuff but is not based in it, for obvious reasons, have called out his bullshit. Power consumption in the current period has gone down compared to July 2023 when the load shedding program started nationwide. The highest load on the grid, Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024, was 27,200 megawatts per hour, whereas the highest recorded load last July was 35,500 megawatts per hour. This means that the maximum consumption has gone down by 8,300 megawatts in January 2024 compared to July 2023, and the actual potential of the collective power grid is 59,360 megawatts, according to the latest annual report from the power holding company for Egypt for the year 2021-2022, meaning that the highest load recorded on Tuesday represents only 45.8% of the actual potential of the power grid in Egypt, and comparing to January of 2023, the highest recorded load then was 26,700 megawatts, meaning the consumption of January 2024 only went up by around 500 megawatts. Why does the government carry out load shedding? According to the president, load shedding is to save natural gas to export it in exchange for dollar resources. And he said in a conference in September of 2023 that cutting the power for an hour each day saves $300 million monthly. TLDR, this is all their fault and they are continuing to make it worse and we're expected to pay for it.
After careful consideration, I have decided.
Oh, and speaking of gas, they're also considering raising prices for that too. But oh, the humanity, they are looking out for the students in their power cuts. Load shedding program will be carried out during the day, not night, as final start. And Sir Butkus here clarifies, saying, cancelling the nightly load shedding starting Wednesday, January 3rd, and doing it instead between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. This decision was made by Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli to help students study and prepare for the first semester finals. Which I guess is nice for the students, but probably bad news for anyone trying to get anything done during the day, which happens to be the time in which everything is supposed to get done. If you thought doing paperwork was already bad with the uncooperative employees and systems breaking down all the damn time, now there's also a higher chance the power is gonna cut randomly. And you know, I think there are other ways the students here could be helped more meaningfully, some of which are actually basic shit that you'd expect to be already a thing. Here's a fun little clip from the law school at Sadat University. In case you didn't catch that, the professor slapped this student. The video unfortunately has no audio, so we can't judge the situation fully, but regardless, I don't think a professor should be allowed to get physical with a student under any circumstance. Interestingly though, this is allegedly an old video according to the university. The video in question has been recently shared on some social media pages as well as news networks, which implies the incident in the video is recent, which it isn't, as it is proven to have taken place on the 23rd of March 2022, and as soon as the administration learned of the incident, the dean of the college contacted the then head of the university about investigating the education staff member the complaint is filed against. And this was on the 27th of March 2022, where the investigation was approved on the 9th of April 2022. Attached was a CD with evidence of the incident in that request. And during the investigation with the staff member, the person who filed the complaint let go of the complaint on the condition of receiving a public apology from the defendant in front of his colleagues in the same lecture hall, which has been done already as noted in the investigation. Now this is all nice and dandy, but there are two issues I find with this. The first is that the student could have very well been pressured into backing down by the other professors. They're a mob like that and they will have each other's backs in front of outsiders, regardless of any personal conflicts they themselves might have. Secondly, I think this is the issue, that the professor wasn't punished or sent to mental rehabilitation should he actually have issues, because even if he apologized, it hasn't been said that the cause of the problem was fixed or that the issue is that the professor slapped a student. They just contained the situation. For all we know, this professor could very well be toxic again to other students in the future or even to his family. Before that, according to this person here, around 2 years ago, an international law professor insulted a female student, made fun of her, and broke her phone as a punishment that he saw fit for answering her phone during a lecture. And today there's a video of a professor in another law school who slapped a student as punishment that he saw fit. And everybody wonders why the masses don't believe in law. And indeed, it is very ironic that such violations are done by law professors. While on the topic of education, remember that cringe contest to hire 30,000 new teachers? The one that ended up failing because the army stuck their noses in it deeper than a dog does to another dog's ass at the park? Well, the teachers who got disqualified for being pregnant or overweight are still pissed apparently, as the Egyptian initiative disputes the elimination of women who had qualified for the 30,000 teachers competition for being overweight, pregnant, or low fitness. Someone pointed out an interesting fact. Obviously they were gonna eliminate them, or rather not hire anyone, and that it was just a show, because they have decided that students in the last year of education faculties will spend their last college year working in schools without pay, and with that they fix the shortage at no cost.
What the fuck? Egypt.
Before we move on from education, I want to just remind you that the students are still not doing okay and are still killing themselves. Someone from my group just committed suicide. Really, all I can say is, may God take revenge on any professor in college or anyone who has caused him to get to this. Responses on this varied. Some blame the college. Professors in Egypt generally are very emotionally harmful. They compete on who can make things harder for the students and they brag about it so much. My first lecture with a professor, she went in saying she was the most complained about professor in the department and her tests are super hard and annoying. She said this full of pride. which I can confirm. I've had a similar incident actually. A professor said to us on my first year, verbatim, that he's only cried twice in his life. The first was a private event from his personal life, and the second was when he gave a student an A+. This was said as a flex, and he has followed through on it. Nobody got an A+, which, like, I don't give a shit if it's an A+ or an A or even a B. I'm way over our education system. But I know I deserve the highest grade on that subject, and so did a bunch of my friends, but none of us got it. Anyways, back to the issue at hand. Some others coped for the professors. God have mercy on him and give his family strength, but nothing justifies suicide. Not hard education, not professors with complexes. It's probably not because of the professors or anything. No matter how hard education gets, it surely won't cause someone to end their life. It's gotta be other build-ups and stresses. God have mercy on him and forgive him. Which is not true, obviously. It can very well lead to that, especially in our fucked up society where even your own family is a likely source of pressure and even danger should you not meet their expectations. And finally, this dickhead just said, it's so easy to blame others. On the topic, a video popped up, allegedly of a Sudanese dude attempting suicide in Cairo by jumping off the Ibrahim Pasha statue. The video may be disturbing, so if you don't want to see it, just skip to the timestamp on the screen somewhere now. Now, this has been said not to be a suicide, rather just an attempt to climb the statue, which I think is bullshit. That definitely looked like an intentional jump. But this news is from Cairo 24 anyway, so like I'm not even surprised. However, multiple people have also said that the dude didn't actually die and that he is not even Sudanese. This is close to where I live. Bro is not Sudanese nor dead, fractured ribs or something. Still tragic, obviously, and I hope he gets better, both physically and mentally. And well, I hate to say it, but news of people putting themselves to sleep here are hardly news anymore. The only reason I looked into this one in particular and am including it here is because Egypt actually has a lot of refugees and immigrants, believe it or not. Many came from Syria and as of recently from Sudan. Following the civil war, coup, and whatever the fuck else is happening down there right now, it's terrible. So naturally some fled to Egypt. And let me tell you, Egyptians love to bitch about how the West treats them bad because they're Muslims when they move or work there. But nobody says anything about how shitty they are to outsiders on their own land. So much that this shit was trending on Twitter, or X if your dad left when you were 5. And this racist attitude is fueled by the government occasionally blaming their own failures on refugees. You know, those damn immigrants taking our jobs and shit? Sound familiar?
Walk out the door, just turn around now, cause you're not welcome anymore.
The irony is written on the wall here, and it's even more hilarious when you consider the fact that Syrians are genuinely better workers and better people in general than Egyptians. So even if they were stealing their jobs, which they are not, it would be more than deserved. And before you say it, I know this is a generalization and that not all Egyptians are racist, blah blah blah. It cannot be denied that a fair share of them are, especially among the older age groups. It's always those fucking boomers.
Any progress with the boomers? I'd rather you just dealt with the boomers, but all right.
And you know, nationality and color ain't the only or even main basis for discrimination here. Can you take a guess what is? Some Muslims from El Azif village and neighboring villages in Samallut province in Armenia have assaulted a number of the village's Christians last Monday to prevent them from building a new church in the village, which was officially licensed, which led to the burning of some of the houses, sheep, and agricultural shacks belonging to the village's Christians, according to the official of Religion and Freedoms in the Egyptian Initiative. Now, I vaguely remembered hearing something about a pact between Muslims and Christians in the Arab Peninsula not to build more churches than there already were. So I went and did some digging, and it turns out such a thing exists. Al-Uhda al-Umariyya, Umar's assurance, was basically a pact between Muslims and Christians in which Umar gives them safety and equal rights to Muslims, which honestly looks based. But then there's a strange addendum where the Christians allegedly waived a bunch of rights and set a lot of submissive rules upon themselves. Another interesting thing I noticed about this is that this addendum is not on the English version of the Wikipedia page on which I found the stuff. It's in the Arabic version only. Just goes to show I'm not talking out of my ass when I tell Western Muslims they don't get the full version, and a lot is either lost in translation or purposely hidden. Now, I'm not saying this pact is the reason this incident happened. I don't know that for sure. I'm simply saying it could be a possibility rather than just the Muslim majority being bullied as usual. It could be a case of the tradition lives on but its source is forgotten. Al-Minya is a very peculiar case and is always expected to catch on fire on religious grounds at any time. I've worked in Al-Minya from August 2013 till the end of December. 4 months full of events of religious strife, starting from a dispute over land in which 6 people fell from the 2 Muslim and Christian villages, and then talk of a love and runaway story, and despite the Muslim girl coming back, the village was turned to a pile of ashes, and before all that was a complete burning of everything. The terrorists put an X on every house, church, and even orphanages. In August 2013, Ilminia is a case to be studied. Why all these things happened there? I've personally never been to it, but I can confirm the violence that went down at the time following the disbanding of the protest in Ramal Adawiyah. In light of recent events though, I wouldn't completely rule out the violence at the time being actually the military's doing as part of their efforts at the time to deface the Muslim Brotherhood and at the same time set them up as a scarecrow to get people back in line with later. But I guess we'll never know for sure. So remember how power prices went up? Well, so did the internet. Remember how the power service also got shittier? Well, so did the internet. Telecom Egypt announces an increase in landline internet prices starting January 5th, reaching up to 33%. And let me remind you that we still deal with monthly bandwidth quotas here. We don't have unlimited use, so while it may be cheap compared to other countries, you no longer even get what you paid for. Then what would they do to us if the service was good? The speed's unstable, it's inconsistent, and has to cut 2 or 3 times a day. Not to mention the quota that vanishes with no idea where it goes. The whole world has normal internet, only we still have this primitive thing. At the time of writing, I am at the 2 months mark of shitty service. Speed maxes out at 600 kilobytes per second. The official deal that I pay for is 3000 by the way. And it cuts randomly from a few minutes all the way up to 3 days straight. Oh, and my quota still ran out magically before it was due for renewal, despite not even having access to it.
Technology!
I stayed in Egypt for about 3 weeks, charged 90 gigabytes of internet, and they ran out after 10 days, so I charged another 90. My official usage outside Egypt is 85 gigabytes per month. So you'd think bro would use less considering the speed here is slower than wherever the fuck he lives, right? Wrong. It's as if the wires here have holes in them or something. Not only did the service get more expensive, installing a landline also went up in price by roughly 100%. From Masrawi News Network, after the internet package's price increase, Telecom Egypt raises the fees for installing a landline by over 100%. In the article it shows detailed prices. It went from 115 to 203, so it's not exactly over 100%, just shy of it, but that's still horrendous, so like whatever. Car licensing fees and taxes have also gone up tremendously because the import lockdowns were not bad enough. Before you is a table of the new prices, which are based on the specs and origin of the car. And if you don't understand it, that's okay, I don't either. But there are people who do, who explain it. 5-fold increase in the costs of contracts of sale or rental for any car starting from the first day of 2024. I don't understand, is this paid for registration or licensing or what? Registration. And why is it so much?
Don't ask questions!
The government is trying even more desperately to restrict outwards cash flow and even internal if it's in hard currency. To that end, they've taken a bunch of measures that seem to do more harm than good. It's a whole bunch of nothing that is phrased in the most annoying way possible, but the gist of it is that the fucking central bank, the source of all evil,
am I a joke to you?
Released new regulations that choke money circulation even more, especially hard currency. And in turn, they only slightly loosened some bullshit in customs after they snagged a buttload of dollars from people by unlawfully restricting and investigating perfectly legal transactions. And they keep going back and forth on this dollars from an unknown source thing. 1 month it's no questions asked, the next it's where'd you get this? Where are you sending this? Why are you sending this? Who sent you this?
The answer to everything is your mom.
To no apparent pattern or reason, just utter chaos and confusion in our banking system as always. The EGP is literally cancelled. People here love to give nicknames to stuff. The Egyptian pound is currently affectionately called El Sharmout. So they want people to deposit their dollars in banks and just a month later confiscate it and ask where they got it. Here are the results of the leeching, stealing, stupid thugs policies. The black market will move out of Egypt and this will terribly affect the dollar liquidity on the market and direct foreign investment. The country will declare bankruptcy before the end of 2024, an unprecedented economic, social and security crisis. This comment here points out how literally the same paragraph contradicts itself, highlighting tighter restrictions on dollars and to increase foreign cash flow. And you know, while such measures do let them hold on to whatever dollars they have currently, to some extent anyway, it prevents the introduction of any new dollars or investments, and it kills the country's credibility and with it any future potential benefits. It's super short-sighted and frankly just retarded. A middle school bully wouldn't be this dumb and aggressive. My condolences for the EGP. The ghost of dollar dealings looms over us, like Lebanon. To those unaware, the Lebanese currency has practically been omitted and everyone deals locally in dollars there, and the government rolls with it and even encourage it by using the official exchange rate from the fucking 80s, something Egypt is also doing currently. The official exchange rate is like 31 per dollar, while the actual one on the black market has reached 70 last I heard at the time of writing. The Egyptian central bank is the only one in the world that has no dollars and at the same time doesn't open up a dollar account for you until they know where you got it from. And if you got two brain cells to rub together, you just do like the Swiss and take the money, no questions asked. Maybe include a waiver if you're that concerned. And don't get too excited about the customs thing I mentioned. It's still horrendous and shit still gets lost and everything is still in an indefinite stalemate. Some people shipped furniture whose custom fees was 100,000 Egyptian pounds. By the time the containers reached the port, a decision came from the Egyptian Customs Authority to price custom charges by weight and in dollars at $1.25 per kilo after intense negotiation. It's 6,500 kilos, and that wasn't enough for them. They added a fine of 50% of the custom fees value. So, if we believe this story and do the math, it's $12,187.5 with the fine included. Now convert that to Egyptian pounds. If we use the official bullshit number, it's 377,812 Egyptian pounds. And if you use the actual number, it's gonna be around 853,125. Shy of £1 million just in custom fees. How much do you think the actual stuff costs? Because I doubt it's anywhere near that. I'm an importer and I am now bankrupt and closing my office. I had 15 employees who are now out of a job because of the wise economic policies. Banks now apparently hire collection firms to hit up people who are late on payments, and these collection firms have some questionable methods. This reads, I was late on my credit card payment for medical reasons. This is how the bank responded. Crédit Agricole. Of course it's a fucking bank. Anyways, the text itself reads, you don't have £1,900 to pay, sir? Or would you prefer people to show up at your work and home addresses? And what are these people gonna do? When they come, you'll find out. Obviously reads like a threat. At first I disregarded this as a fluke or made up bullshit for attention, but apparently this is and has been a thing. All collection firms are like this with all banks, no exception. Employ highly qualified individuals, lawyers or people with diplomas with desirable salaries. They may show up and start an argument and yell to scare the client to pay. If one of them goes far and gets handed to the cops, the bank throws him under the bus right away. I hit a guy before once and had their firm closed up, and it was also with Crédit Agricole. Just never trust the fucking That's why they hand it over to these firms, and if you report them, they say it's not our problem, we sold the debts to them. Speaking of credit cards, the Bank of Egypt decided not to permit newly issued credit cards to be used internationally for the first 6 months, and also, the National Egyptian Postal Service announced recently reducing the upper limit for Easy Pay cards on purchases and foreign currency withdrawals abroad to only $60 per month, coinciding with banks halting the use of newly issued credit cards in international dealings. Credit cards were the last open path to sending money outside, so with that hindered too, go fuck yourselves, dear citizens. But hey, at least InstaPay is safe now. The Central Bank of Egypt decides to postpone the application of fees on InstaPay dealings indefinitely. InstaPay only works locally as far as I know, so it makes sense it's still working. It's like glorified Vodafone Cash pretty much. All of this bullshit that I just told you are just desperate failed attempts to stop the black market so they can regain control of the exchange rate and get their cuts from every transaction.
الدولة النهاردة أجهزتها كلها شغالة على الدولار. بتكلم امبارح صديق عزيز بقول له ايه الدنيا ايه؟ قال لي لا احنا دلوقتي متفرغين للدولار، هنجيب السوق السوداء الارض. بقول له ازاي يعني؟ في القهاوي هتلاقي قاعدين بيتابعوا، في الشوارع بيتابعوا، حضرتك ما تشوفهمش ما تعرفهمش، فجأة تلاقي طب عليك تعالى. وعايز اقول لكم الايام اللي فاتت اتعمل قضايا كثيره جدا الايام اللي فاتت ولسه اللي جاي، توجيه ضربات للسوق السوداء الدولار، ضربات شديده جدا، ودي اجراءات الدوله بتعملها حاليا وشغاله عليها ومستمره. وعايز اقول لحضراتكم كل اجهزه الدوله شغاله على الموضوع ده، مش الاموال العامه بس، لا مش الاموال العامه، الاموال العامه باجهزه وزاره الداخليه بالكامل، بكل الجهات المعنيه بالكامل، كله شغال النهارده مواجهه للدولار والسوق السوداء، لانه لابد من القضاء على السوق السوداء قولا واحدا. طول ما عندنا سوق موازي هتفضل عندنا ازمه. كان عندنا سوق موازي وتم ضربها، رجع تاني وبقت اسوأ مما كانت عليه. بقينا النهارده بقت تجاره العمله النهارده تجاره، وعايز اقول لك تجاره العمله النهارده فيها سجن وعقوبه تصل الى 10 سنوات، من 3 ل 10، فممكن تاخد الحد الاقصى من العقوبه. ومصادره الاموال، عايز اقول لكم صدروا اموال الايام اللي فاتت كتير قوي عشان مسكوا ناس كتير، ولسه شغالين يمسكوا وهيفضلوا يمسكوا وهيفضلوا يواجهوا. وانا بقول لحضرتك لازم تبقى قلقان طول ما انت عندك دولار بره البنوك الرسميه.
You know it's never gonna work. You can't force such a thing, but they will try nonetheless, employing terrorist tactics if they have to, and they are, as you saw. Feels like we're in the Friday market, not a country that supposedly has order and law. The government finds out the dollar exchange rate from the black market online just like us. And you know, when we talk about dollars, we can't forget about the Egyptians who managed to leave this hellhole. Just because you left Egypt doesn't mean Egypt is gonna leave you. After a 30% decline in Egyptian transactions from abroad over 3 months, Khaled Abu Bakr sends a message to the Egyptians working abroad. Don't abandon your country.
Give me your fucking money!
No.
What?
I said no.
Why not?
I don't want to.
But I've got a gun.
I don't care.
Doesn't make any sense. Too bad.
Before I show you the video, I want to point out that the government is not even making it easy for these people to send money to their families in Egypt, even though that money is going into Egypt.
البنك المركزي بيقول ان تحويلات المصريين العاملين بالخارج تراجعت 30% خلال 3 شهور. المصريين في الخارج دول جزء رئيسي ومهم جدا ومصدر محترم للعمله الاجنبيه في مصر. انا بسافر الرياض، بشتغل مدرس كيمياء، بجيب دولارات، بجيب ريالات، بقوم احولها في البنك، اخويا بيفكها في البنك وبيجيب عربيه جديده او بيبني الدور الزياده في البيت او بيجهز اختي او بيعمل مش عارف ايه. يعني شقاك وتعبك وانت في الغربه الصبح وبتصحى وايام بتبقى حر شديد وايام بتبقى برد شديد وظروف العمل قاسيه، بس لو انت بتحول بس 200 دولار 1000 دولار لمصر داخل الجهاز المصرفي انت بتخدم بلدك خدمه كبيره جدا. والمصريين اللي في الخارج دول ثروه مصريه حقيقيه وناس وطنيين ومحترمين وحبهم لمصر حب كبير، ويعني الغربه قاسيه وصعبه لكن عمرهم ما تخلوا عن بلدهم ابدا.
Just a load of hot shit, of course, and if anyone falls for this, honestly they deserve whatever comes to them. Whatever tough conditions may be outside, I bet it's nothing compared to just our day-to-day life here under the current system. Coinciding with this and the other messes, Egypt has receded on the international scale of justice and sovereignty of law for 2023, taking the 136th position out of 142 countries. At this point, I think even war zones like Iraq or Ukraine are better in terms of quality of life if you avoid the fighting zones. What is Egypt even doing on the scale of justice and law of sovereignty? Masadash made a nice summary of the year 2023, comparing it to the previous year. Inflation rate went from 14.8% to 35.3%, and food drink inflation rates went up from 24.8% to 63.6%. Oh, and keep in mind, all these numbers are excluding December, the month with the most action, as its statistics hadn't come up yet when they made this. Transfers from Egyptians abroad went down from $28.3 billion to $24.2 billion, estimated by the International Bank. The foreign currency reserves went from $34 billion to $35.1 billion, but around $30 billion of them are deposits from Gulf countries, aka it's not actual money we own. The average price of a gram of 21 karat gold went from 1,685 Egyptian pounds to 3,300. The exchange rate is a mess, as previously discussed. The official went from 24.7 to 30.8, and black market went from 28 to 52. Again, this was in mid-late December. Right now, as of January 19, we're talking 70 on the black market. External debts went from $155.7 billion in June 2022 to $164.7 billion in June 2023, all of which went to bullshit we'll talk about in a bit. Minimum wages bit the dust even harder since they remain almost unchanged, while the value of money is holding its arms up for more fun on the downward slide. It went from 3,000 Egyptian pounds, which equated to $107 at the time, to 4,000 Egyptian pounds, which equates to $77 in December, both according to the respective black market rate. Suez Canal revenues went up a little from $7 billion in June 2022 to $8.8 billion in June 2023. And finally, tourism revenues went from $10.7 billion to $13.6 billion in June of both years respectively. It turns out that the country's situation should be a lot better than it is. Who would have thought? When we compare both years, we find that the collapse was rapid and unexplained, and while the state is saying they're doing achievements, we all got hit in just a year. And also the foreign reserve is 35 billion, 30 of which are Gulf deposits, so the country has no money in it despite the billions we got. But now the burning question is, where the fuck did all that money go? All these mountains of money?
Get all the cash, baby, call on cash, falling from the ceiling.
Egypt prepares to spend more billions of dollars to double the size of the administrative capital. To show you just how ridiculous this is, hi, the admin capital in its current size is 7 times the size of Paris. Bye.
Bruh.
This is supposedly in response to investors' requests, of which there are so many, of course. The head of the company of the administrative capital, Khaled Abbas, says that Egypt is getting ready to begin the second phase of the administrative capital to fulfill the requests of investors, with expectations to finish it by the year 2027. Assuming we even last that long.
That's enough.
The first phase is not even done, by the way. The city is a ghost town, but it's lit 24/7 and the monorail in it is running with no passengers in it. It's about as dystopian as it gets, really. And I'm sure this is gonna be a great investment, especially with the cement and iron prices going up, and the city being a money sink with no potential to make money in the foreseeable future, or ever, really. And they ain't bluffing. 35 billion Egyptian pounds to build the first drinking water station in the new administrative capital. Honestly, I'm less concerned about the price tag on that and more concerned about the fact that the drinking water station is coming in this late into the project. Like, they wanted to have people living there and all the government firms moved to it in like 2021 and it didn't even have drinking water. Apparently, it relied on 2 external water lines before. And it gets even better, as if the city wasn't repulsive enough with its isolated nature, ridiculous prices, and just horrendous planning. They're scamming people who did fall for it. So, we have an apartment in the administrative capital in Midtown condo compound, and they're mandating that we finish the apartment within 6 months from receiving it, and each day after that is fined for 500 Egyptian pounds, aside from a 30,000 that we have to pay to provide us with water during preparations. Is this normal or logical? And they even show the contract where this bullshit is listed, but nothing about the water provision thing. But to be fair, this would have been enough to get me to walk away, assuming I was somehow fooled into buying there. Like, come on bro, you can't trust the Egyptian government. And you know what's funny? This cursed city was actually not even his idea. This thing was proposed all the way back in 2007 by Mubarak's son, but Big Daddy, rest in peace, said no, even though they could afford it at the time. The president Hosni Mubarak cancelled what the government had announced about its project to erect a new capital for Egypt, where he asserted that the state has no intention to build a new capital, clarifying that he won't take the step to spend huge sums to build the capital at a time where the country needed the money to achieve social justice for citizens. Yeah, sure. And he stated during a tour in Ismailia, "We are planning for the future, 10 to 15 years ahead, and there are practical studies and continuous planning, but that doesn't mean we will carry out what we plan right away." Like, the second part of this is obviously bullshit propaganda, but at the very least, you gotta respect that he didn't build it, even though the country could actually afford it at the time. In contrast, homeboy here drowned the country in debt to build it without planning it, short or long term, at our own expense, out of our own pockets, and it ended up being a failure in the end. And not only that, they're testing the water on building more of them. El Wadi Jadid Governorate announced its preparation to open the project of a new miniature capital with a budget of 400 million Egyptian pounds to be the first administrative capital outside of Cairo, and this is in accordance with the state's plan to erect an administrative capital in all governorate.
كمان واحد كمان واحدة والنبي يا ري كفاية بقى ده كمان واحد كفاية بقى ده كمان واحد
Lieutenant General Mohammed Zamallout said that the admin capital in El Wadi Jadid will span 101 acres in El Kharga city, will be solar powered, and will include the biggest governmental administrative complex for different ministries that use all forms of digitization. And he added that it will be opened up during the following days and will be linked to the one in Cairo, will include the biggest governmental complex, banking complex, amenities, and the first ideal sport compound.
موتوسيكلات وعجل واجهزه كمبيوتر ووجبه من الكانتين اللي مش عاوزين تقربوا له ابدا وترابيزات بلياردو وبنج.
Now, this is in the most dependable of sources. I've never heard of this news outlet before, and the account mainly posts similar bullshit from all around the Middle East as progress. Also, the phrasing isn't exactly professional, but I'm willing to believe it, seeing how out of touch it is, which is characteristic of our government. I mean, come on, the water station for New Gotham will cost 35 billion, and you want to build this whole thing with 400 million? It's not unheard of for lieutenant generals to run bullshit projects like this and spew out a bunch of nonsense, and then we never hear of it again. I just found this ridiculous and funny enough to include as a gag. Meanwhile, the people are becoming more broke and miserable by the day. Dearies, there are people who, when they receive a cake or a box of chocolate as a gift, they offer it for sale on Facebook groups to get meat or chicken with the money. The people's situation have become very difficult. The dating scene is more fucked than the people in it want to be. Advice for girls: if your fiance or husband makes 4,000 to 7,000 monthly, don't go out to eat and go to the movies more than twice a month. The least such an outgoing would cost is 8,000 now, meaning if it happens twice, it'll be around half or a third of his paycheck. The more privileged thought that this was being cheap and to just jerk off if you can provide better. People are telling him, if your income is like this, don't get in a relationship at all, ignoring the fact that this is the average income of the crushing majority of young men in normal age of marriage. So is he supposed to not love or get in a relationship or anything until his paycheck reaches 10k or so? And even then, it would be equivalent to the 3K right now and stay in this hellish loop until he retires. Oh, and the situation with medicine is getting worse still. If anyone can provide 2 boxes of diabetes type 2 medication, please contact me. I looked in so many pharmacies and it's just not there. So amidst all this disarray, Mr. Madbouli had to come out and say something. You know, talk to the people. Let them know what's happening. Except he blamed the people for everything and painted the government as the victim who is bearing the burden of its citizens. Let that sentence sink in for a bit, will ya? Prime Minister Madbouli said that there are 275 million loaves of bread baked each day from dawn to morning, meaning 100 billion loaves of bread a year, and the cost of bread on the state is 91 billion Egyptian pounds. He stated that the government has been following the criticism it got following the price increase in some goods, explaining that the economic amends program is in its first phase, assuring that any economic repairs require rationing. He added that when the government started the program, it focused on rationing, pointing out that since 2021 there hasn't been any government support on any petrol products besides stovepipes, and he remarked that there is a plan to end load shedding by 2024 and the annual price increase in 2025, clarifying that the Egyptian state has bore the greater burdens for the citizens in regards to inflation and price increases, and that strategic decisions are being made. You know, this is even more infuriating when you realize their attempt to quell unrest is actually an admission of guilt. This isn't the full thing, by the way, it's even worse than this, but for brevity's sake I am putting it all in. But I am putting the counter argument by Sahih Masr, another free news network who debunked this pile of steaming shit. The first mistake: the cost of free medications in public hospitals is 22 billion Egyptian pounds. The cost of medication and infant milk was 3 billion Egyptian pounds in the general state budget, not 22 billion as Prime Minister claimed, according to the financial report of the year 2023-2024. And even when including all means of healthcare support in the financial year budget, it would be 14.7 billion Egyptian pounds, not 22 billion. And these means are support for medications and infant milk, support for students, providing women, preschool children, impoverished people and farmers health insurances, and treatment at the state's expense. The second error: support for electricity in the new year budget is 90 billion Egyptian pounds. The value of electricity support in 2023-2024 general budget was around 6 billion Egyptian pounds dedicated to the industrial sector, not homes, and it isn't 90 billion Egyptian pounds as claimed by the minister. And according to the general budget, this support for industrial sector means a reduction in price of 10 piastres per kilowatt per hour for power used in industrial activities, which the Treasury covers in compliance with the Prime Minister's decision number 781 for the year 2020. As for support for home power, it is zero, as the state does not support power for citizens, and this is not the first year without power support. It's been the case since 2020. Despite that part of the population pays less than the cost of power, this support is not provided by the government because it relies on a mutual support system where it achieves profits from the power prices for higher classes with heavy consumption, which makes up for the support the state provides to the lower classes with lower consumption, which are typically low-income households. This means that the higher consumption classes bear the cost of supporting the lower ones, leaving the Egyptian government bearing nothing, and the power support has gone down from around 26.6 billion in 2018 to 16 billion Egyptian pounds in 2019, then to zero in 2020 and onwards. The third mistake: every year 2 million new citizens are added. Revising this period from 2018 to 2023, national population growth ranged between 1,882,000 to 1,443,000 annually, not 2 million as the minister claims. According to the population survey from the Mobilization and Statistics Center, the actual growth rate in Egypt, difference between births and death, is on a constant decline in the recent years. Additionally, it turns out spiraling food prices in Egypt are actually not caused by a global crisis, but rather shitty management. While food prices are rising in Egypt, some reaching record highs, the global indicator for food prices has gone down in 2023 by around 13% compared to the average in 2022, according to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. So it wasn't a global crisis like they said, huh? Finally, Big Man had enough of having God complex and decided to be God himself. Astaghfirullah al-Azim.
والله لقف أنا وانتو قدام ربنا أسألكم زي ما انتم بتسألوني وأحاسبكم زي ما انتم بتحاسبوني.
I just love the face of this Azhar guy clapping. It says a lot, I think. All in all, the country is crashing real soon. I seriously doubt it'll last till the end of the year or even summer, but time will tell. At this point, I'm willing to live through a break and be over with it than this constant dull suffering and decay. But what would be even better is for me to get the fuck out of it and leave it all behind, which you can help achieve by donating through the link down below. Pretty smooth, huh? Also, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, leave a comment, all that stuff. There's a lot more content to come. Take care, homies.